the jobs of artists are to bring all their messy garbage to the office and show it to everybody and say, I'm going to make something out of this. And this notion that to be an artist, you have to have gone through some sort of suffering or some sort of had something. And I really don't believe that. Everyone's a little tortured.
Hey, it's Ryan Holiday. Welcome to another episode of the Daily Stoic podcast. My guest today is someone who, if you're not familiar with his music and you're familiar with my writing, in a way you are familiar with his music because I have probably written more of my books to Matt Berninger and The National than very, very few artists. I love The National. When I write, I tend to listen to songs on repeat over and over again. And this is a band that I'll listen to their whole album, but often I'll pick one or two songs and I'll just listen to that song on repeat so it blurs together. It gets me into an emotional place that allows me to access whatever I have to do with my writing. I think the first National song I would have heard would have been Mr. November, so this would have been like '08, and it's been amazing to watch this band, which wasn't a new band then, continue to grow and rise. I think they're a great example of the kind of artist I'm talking about in my book, Perennial Seller. Their stuff's amazing. The new album, I Am Easy to Find, is one of my favorites, but Matt's solo stuff is really great. He did a song called Walking on a String with Phoebe Bridgers, which I love. Just an incredible band. I was so excited to have him on the podcast. Thanks to Pete Holmes, a mutual friend who connected us. Pete's interview with Matt is also very good. And as you'll see in the interview, I sort of explain just how big a role the National has played in my family's life. Anyways, great interview. I think you'll really like this one. We talk about art, we talk about creativity, we talk about ego, talk about how to manage this crazy period that we're all in and the opportunities in it and how, look, ultimately one of the benefits the artist has is we turn the events, the things that happen to us into fuel, into what we do. And hopefully that can be a lesson to you, whatever industry you happen to be in. So here's my interview with Matt Berninger of The National. We talk stoicism and a lot more. It's a big day for you guys. I'm glad we got to do this on today of all days.
Oh, because it's Tom's anniversary?
Exactly.
No, are you talking about Taylor Swift?
I am.
Okay. That was a really fun song to work on, and Aaron's been working on stuff with her for a while, and we've kind of known her for a long time, and so it doesn't seem like for us it hasn't really, all the stuff that's going on with her hasn't seemed that like much of a big like surprise, but it is funny how people are reacting to it so in so many big ways.
It's weird how small, like I think for people who are not in a creative industry, it can feel like this sort of big impenetrable thing, but it's actually a small world, and the people who are sometimes the biggest people in the world at that thing, they're part of the reason they are so big is that they actually just really love music and or books or art, and so it can be a smaller world than you think, and that's where some of these collaborations come from, I feel like.
I mean along the way you pretty quickly realize that everybody is in this, the artists, I mean, at least you meet a lot of people throughout the industry that it's ulterior motives or different kind of motivations, but almost all the artists are just are almost down to the last one, just kind of a little bit nerdy misfits who were the artsy kids and got into music, and all the rest of the stuff that comes with this kind of collected around them, but they're just usually the same person with all the basic insecurities and that everyone does. So almost most artists I meet are charming, just disarming and affable and just whatever, chill. And Taylor's definitely fits that vibe. So there is, I think maybe from the outside with all the packaging and the glamour and stuff, sometimes people seem sort of bigger or even like tougher, and so like, and that's why I just feel like they're free free reign to attack in anything, celebrities. In some ways, I'm not defending, poor celebrities for being, but somebody like Taylor Swift who's just an artist. She's been trying to make art, the best art she can make from the beginning, and she's had incredible success on the back of that art. But the rest of it's all, I'm sure she would love for all the rest of it just to go away.
You guys have sort of had a dream career in that sense. I got to imagine, in that one, you've got to do it for a really long time, which most people don't do. But then there's sort of different ways to do it, right? There's, you explode onto the scene out of nowhere and you're huge. There's the long, hard slog and you never make it. I mean, it's pretty unusual, I think, for a band to be accelerating 30 years in, but that's the way you want to do it.
We're only 20 years in. But it is funny that we, not by choice or anything, we were ambitious and as hell, right? When we started, and because we were starting right in the shadows of the Lower East Side, New York, Strokes, Interpol, all that stuff. We were practicing next to them and going to all their shows, and so we wanted a piece of that. We wanted to get into that, and we'd all been in bands in Cincinnati and different places. So we were a little bit older than most of those other bands already. At least I was, knew what a scene and kind of like had seen on the edges of one in Cincinnati. And so when we got to New York and all that stuff, and started, I was going to Mercury Lounge every night. I worked a few blocks away, and by seeing so many good and ambitious and exciting and fearless artists, night after night, you really learn what the difference is, because you see just as many artists that are just not quite good enough, and for you to like care enough, but 1 out of 10 you'll be like, there's something going on there. And so I would see so many shows. We were all well aware of how we had to be ourselves and we had to be really good, and then it took a while to get there. Just knowing you had to be good and had to be cool doesn't mean you can figure that formula out for a while. And honestly, I think our live shows were always really, really good from the very beginning, but our figuring out how to record us and how to come together into a record took us a few years. And all of that is to say is just like, when you're starting out, you're seeing really ambitious people trying to do impossible things. It's like you're seeing all these like amateur magicians, and then every once in a while one of them does something that no one can figure out, and so I learned to respect all, and now we're in these festivals and there's just big stars everywhere. Usually on a person to person level, most of them are all very genuinely just affable, and sometimes the protective people around them, it can get that's where it gets strange. And I can tell, and artists often shut down because they get exhausted with, the more popular you just get exhausted with the constant onslaught of stuff. But if they feel like they're not in danger at all, every artist I've met, almost all of them to a T, has been just kind of nerdy and insecure, just like me.
Yeah, I remember
it's almost always.
I remember with my first book, I had this like you, as you sort of have these huge ambitions, and there's also this sense of like impatience. Like I was like, it has to come out right now, and it's like, if it doesn't come out right now, it's gonna fail, and I'll miss my shot, and that'll be the end of it. And like in retrospect, that book was probably like 8 years early. and I wish, not just 8 years early in terms of timing. The other part is like, if I could write it now, it would be so much better, because I have, all this experience. And so it's like, you need the ambition, but then you also need this patience, and you need like the sort of just hanging aroundness of it to actually align for what your real moment is.
Mm-hmm. I mean, everything you're doing, I think you have to sort of believe that, like, I'm making the greatest record of all time, or this book is going to be on the top of every list. You if you don't have that, ambition or enthusiasm, it comes and goes, but ultimately you should be trying to make a masterpiece every time, right? And and when you start to get finished with something, you can't wait for it to come out, and inevitably you're always going to find out that nope, not a masterpiece. I mean,
Yeah.
and like, but you'll never ever get to the point down the line where you make something that approximates, that where people say, oh, that's really good. um making the one that you thought was going to be a masterpiece and then is a total disaster is like one of the best steps towards that. I've always the National, I really do feel like for many years in the beginning, it's touring, and shows where there's zero people, literally zero people many times, and that is it sounds funny now, but it's like when you've driven 10 hours, and you have to find somewhere to sleep, and you try to hopefully just pick up a few bucks and a few fans, and no one is there, and then you have to get up early and drive to the next place. When that happens, you have to learn something from that. You have to like take that and figure out. And we would always like, luckily, that's what's good about a band as opposed to like just being out there by yourself, is that you make fun of each other, and you the self-deprecating sense of a group of ragtag losers is really healthy. And we always kind of had that. We always had that like sort of fighting spirit to like prove it one fan at a time, and ultimately you kind of do. That's how we did it. But you it can happen either way. Even like sometimes people explode in the pressure of that first record exploding. That can be their biggest challenge of getting around that. That's their biggest obstacle, is that first record they make, and then how do you reinvent yourself later? You see people like we were talking about, like Taylor Swift and people like Fiona Apple, who have and all my favorite artists. You could say that about Dylan. You could say that about Nina Simone. You could say that about Neil Young. All of them go through periods where it's like they mutate into a different thing, and not everybody goes with them right away, or all that kind of stuff is the best artists love when there is something to solve, to get around, and they use their art to sort of to get around that. And Taylor Swift's been attacked, her catalog, all that kind of stuff with Scooter Braun and all that stuff. Just like, that must just be awful to have to just deal with that. And but she's taking this like, well, I will let that deal with that in one way, or with her lawyers, and then meanwhile I'm going to just keep writing songs about myself and that's so healthy. And I'm sure like her choices are a lot of it's motivated by like seeing these things that she can't solve, like a lot of things that you talk about and whatever. And she opens up a door that she never even might have tried to open before.
Yeah, there's certainly some downsides to being an artist. Like the life is hard, and it's all or nothing for a lot of people, and there's all the downsides of it. But the one magical part about it is that the superpower, the gift that normal people don't have in the same way that you do as a songwriter, an author, or a painter, or whatever, is you do get to use all the shitty stuff that happens to you as fuel. Like it's all
Yeah.
material. One of my mentors said to me once, like, so in some
Yeah.
sense, like, and two, as you become more successful, you almost need those things, or else your art becomes untethered from the experiences of normal people. Like if you're not experiencing adversity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's a funny way you just made me think about it. That is like the jobs of artists are to bring all their messy garbage to the office and show it to everybody and say, I'm going to make something out of this, and and you need to help me. It's such a weird thing, you know. It's like whether you're with your band or anything it is. And yeah, it is. But there is this whole thing though that like to people, this notion that to be an artist you have to have gone through some sort of suffering or some sort of had something, and I really don't believe that.
The
And
tortured artist myth.
yeah, I don't believe the tortured artist thing. And I say that because I mean everyone, um everyone's a little tortured, you know. And anybody who's an artist is just somebody who's saying, well, you know, I'm good at talking about sorrow. I'm good at I kind of, for whatever reason, I present my own misery, my own fears in a charming way. I tell either whether you're a comedian, you know,
Sure.
like Pete, who that's how we know each other, like Pete Holmes, and you take all that stuff and you figure out like, wow, everyone has this stuff, and when I like mention it, everyone laughs, and there's something there. You just so like I think, yeah, I obsess over everything. I would consider myself a tortured artist, you know. I bring myself to tears every time I'm trying to, you know, working on a good song, and I dive into all that. And I have problems, you know, but they're not, I would not say my life was filled with any adversity, you
Right.
know, just other than just trying to figure out how to be a decent person and all that kind of stuff. And so I mean, art, you don't have to be, you know, this notion that like I'm a normal person, so I have to have a normal job. It's like, no,
Sure.
you can be a wild, insane artist and come from a very, whatever you would call normal. There's no such thing. And yeah, I don't like this like sense that you need to have experienced some trauma in order to have credibility as an artist, you know.
No, I totally agree with that. It's funny because in The Obstacle is the Way, you know, the question I get all the time is like, well, so what's the biggest obstacle you've ever encountered in your life? Like, what's your adversity? And
Mm-hmm.
I don't like that question, one, because sort of like you, I feel like I've lived a relatively normal life, but it also seems to imply that like obstacles only are real if they're like enormous, like you
Mm-hmm.
lost your leg in an accident, or you had cancer, or, you know,
Mm-hmm.
you were an orphan or something. Like in
Mm-hmm.
reality, the human experience is one of unending amounts of adversity. You wake up and you have shit to deal with every single
Mm-hmm.
day. That's just life. And I think what art is about understanding that and communicating. And I think Stoicism is about sort of persevering through that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that, yeah. I mean, obviously you mentioned like the Taylor Swift record thing, like, and there's a song on the new album. It's a champagne problem, right? That your
Mm-hmm.
record label is being sold and resold or something.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't hurt and it doesn't cause difficulties. And then you
Mm-hmm.
can use that to connect with the experiences of people
Yeah.
in all walks of life.
What's funny is when you talk about stoicism, and in many ways, I would never in a million years call myself. I don't really have too many of those. I have many of the opposites, but I do, and it is. I aspire to that. My dad is a pretty stoic guy. You know, his temperature does not. He does not let his temperature go up, and I think maybe I'm the opposite because of that. You know, but I blow my top and fast, and I try to, like, if I see a potential problem, I will run at it, you know, full speed, instead of just like, whoa, that's maybe not, that's just going to go by, you
Yeah.
know, like anything, half the things that would have gone by, I run out and confront. And that's I found that to be a mistake in my life, you know. And so, but in a funny way, artists, uh, and if artists, the idea of when you talk about stoicism stuff, is the containment of emotion, right? But artists, it's like you have to have the courage to just unleash the emotion, and if you're not actually unleashing the emotion, so being an artist, it's tough to be a stoic artist, you know. you have to be out there humiliating yourself and crying your eyes out publicly and screaming your head off, or painting like this for anyone to pay any attention. So stoicism and art sometimes, I think, kind of can be cross currents or something.
I think so. And then, I mean, Seneca wrote these beautiful plays. If you've ever seen a Delacroix painting, I mean, they're these beautiful sort of vivid. I think there's nothing mutually exclusive about stoicism and art, but there is, that lowercase stoicism of have no emotions, like what the word in English means, I think is anathema to being an artist. But Marcus Aurelius has this line in the beginning of Meditations where he goes, the key is to be free of passion, but full of love. And I think that maybe actually comes closer to expressing what you have to be as an artist. You have to have feeling towards other people, towards life. Maybe what emotions that are not great for an artist, at least in my experience, are, envy and self-loathing and fear and worry and anxiety. I mean, they can make good art, but they don't make for sustainable art or life.
They're not useful tools. They're great. They're great material to make art from. They're great clay, but they're not useful tools to work with that clay. I mean, fear and anxiety, and like, that's all I write about. That's all I write about is how much everything I'm afraid of, and what a shitty person I think I almost am all the time, and kind of want to be sometimes. Always, it's the only thing I can write about. But I have to write about my fear with as much confidence, right? So it's a funny thing. And
is it writing about it a way of processing it, though, so you're not ruled by the emotion?
I think that's where it is. It's like the putting of all of that real emotion that other people have to put it somewhere. And artists, like a lot of people, when you say stoicism, they will, whatever they do, meditate or have a tactic to stay calm in a moment, in a crisis, and not to respond, not to react, but to respond, with everyone has tricks of how they make themselves. And I guess artists are like, if I wasn't writing music and songs and performing, this sort of emotion filled, emotional wreck of a character, maybe I would, in my real, quote unquote, real life, be more of a wreck. Right. And so maybe that's my coping mechanism, but be perfectly honest, I don't really know, because I think this character, or what I write about, then I have a hard time letting that sort of, whatever that person is, I'm not sure if there is a real difference. And I'm just trying, but I don't, like I said, I don't consider myself to have many qualities of stoicism. But I guess that's like, the fact that I wish I was more stoic is one of my most motivating, ambitious factors. And maybe I could be big enough that I can be cool and just chill, maybe I could be famous enough so that I could afford to be stoic. I don't know.
Hey everyone, look, we talked at the end of the year about the spirit of giving, and maybe you saw our recent video with that Anne Frank quote about how nobody ever becomes poor by giving. Today's sponsor is doing something I'm really excited about. I'm actually, as soon as I finish recording this, I'm going to go do it on my computer right now. I'm going to set up a recurring donation on GiveWell. GiveWell is an effective altruism-based nonprofit that helps identify the most effective charities in the world, the ones that do the most good, that save the most lives. Well, if you are a new listener who starts a new monthly donation by the end of February, even if you've given on GiveWell before, but you start a new recurring donation, they'll match your first donation up to $250. And a monthly donation is a commitment to helping others through the year, to making a difference, this Stoic idea of sympatheia. I give to a charity called Against Malaria through GiveWell that for like a couple $100, you can save a human life. Whether you're new to GiveWell or already a donor, if you start a new recurring donation by the end of February, you'll have your first month matched up to $250. To have your donation matched, just go to givewell.org/stoic, choose monthly, pick podcast, and then identify us, Daily Stoic at the end. That's givewell.org/stoic. Select podcast Daily Stoic at checkout. I'm going to go do this right now, and you should do the same. Well, there's that phrase in from one of your other collaborators, Phoebe Bridgers, emotional motion sickness, which I think is such a beautiful expression of like the human condition. And it's like, I think what I'm trying to do, what I'm working on, because I don't feel like I'm naturally stoic. I feel like if you're naturally good at something, it's probably not what you write or talk about a lot because it's just natural to you. So I feel like it's something I'm working on, but I feel like what I'm trying to do is reduce that turbulence in my life because it's not a pleasant way to live. And it's certainly, although I could probably tolerate it, it's not particularly tolerable to the people in your life, which is the other factor that you have to consider as the tortured artist. You know, it's like, you can torture yourself. The problem is when that becomes sort of multi-generational torture.
Right. So you think your self-knowledge of like, I am not naturally this way has driven you to study it and write about it and to sort of, whatever, preach it, proselytize the ideas. That's pretty. So in many ways, all the Stoics, the biggest Stoics were always present out there, sort of trying were they all, preaching Stoicism, or were they just like people talked about them?
No, so like I think Marcus Aurelius is such an interesting example of this. So he writes meditations, but he's not writing it for anyone. He's writing it for himself, right? It's his private meditations. But the person he talks about the most, he talks about his stepfather, this guy named Antoninus. And from what his description of Antoninus, we get the sense that like Antoninus was everything Marcus wanted to be, but naturally wasn't. And that sort of meditations is him, he's writing about, he's like, this is why you can't lose your temper. I make up that he wrote that because he lost his temper, like he's responding to stuff he's struggling in. Like, I don't write in my journal how amazing I am and all the things that I'm doing well. I talk about where I'm falling short. So I get the sense that the people who are drawn to the philosophy and talk and think about it the most, and this is definitely true in my case, it's because you need it the most. And you're kind of reassuring and talking to yourself. And I think great. Your music is obviously for the audience, and this is, as we switch to a commercial system, obviously you're in part making what you do for an audience, but you have to be a member of that audience. Like if you don't like it, if you're just making it for other people and you don't believe in it, I find there's something wrong with that.
Yeah, well, I will say like I'm almost always writing, and most of the people writers I know, they're just always writing about themselves. I think most artists are narcissistic in the sense, it depends on what kind of an artist you are, but they're trying to express something about themselves that they don't think anybody quite totally gets, and I have to make this out of it so you understand, and like normal language or coffee table conversation will not present to you the complicated nuance of my emotional trauma, or why I'm bummed that I got dumped by this girl or whatever, like you don't get, so you have to make a painting, David Bowie was writing song after song about Hermione, right? Just because he never got to quite say to her what he wished he had, and so the rest of his life he's trying to explain why it happened, and he's apologized, right? And it's tiny little things that'll make you just forever try to express the thing that no you don't. I can't explain to you by sitting down or like in a letter. I have to make space oddity, I have to make this or whatever for you to understand, and that's narcissistic, that need to be totally understood so explicitly. Why should you be understood so much? But it resonates. Everyone understands it, right?
There's a part of me that sometimes when I think about why I became a writer, there's a part of me that I can just remember like having dinner with my family, it not feeling understood, exactly as you said, and some sense of like, I'm going to go in my room and sit at my computer and I will get this down perfectly. And then you will understand, like that, right. Like
Totally.
I have a pain. I need to express it. I need people to get it. And that becomes like a compulsion, almost a
Hmm.
form of OCD. It's productive, but there's a
Hmm.
little insanity in it too, I think.
Yeah, I used to. I used to draw, like drawing and taking art classes and just drawing horses or drawing trees and still lives. I used to really that was where I first kind of started feeling an identity, of like this is something I'm good at, and that really that having to get it drawing done is so hard. It takes time and you have to do. And I think that was a really calming thing for me. But I quickly started doing a lot of self-portraits, and my self-portraits, I would spend so much more time on my self-portraits, right? And it just started. My mom was like, "You're drawing a lot of self-portraits. Like, what's so so like doing something that just calms me down?" But it was like I ended up just only trying to get my own face just right so everybody could see what I thought I should look like or whatever. It's like there is something, and I wasn't ignored as a kid. I was a middle child sort of, but why have I always felt so desperate need for people to see me and understand me? um my dad never really needed that, and like it's I don't know where I got that from.
Do you find also this is the most insane part about it for me? So you have this desire to be understood and felt and recognized, and then like you win an award or the project does well or you're profiled by something, and someone gets it. They're like, I loved that song.
Hmm.
It and then so you or I loved your book changed my life or whatever. So you're getting the thing that you said you wanted,
Hmm.
and you like my instinct is to like look away. It actually makes me very uncomfortable, like
Hmm.
like I'm not I've
Hmm.
told myself, hey, if I get this perfectly, I'll feel good, and I'll
Hmm.
that'll be it. Then you get it and your mind immediately,
Now,
it's too
yeah,
much.
because now that you've got it, the only thing now is you just have to hold on to it. It's like that's like any game, like you're desperately trying to get the ball and start running with it, but the second you got it, everyone's after you, right? It sucks. It's like that's a and that's the funny thing. It's like the second you get any attention, people say like, oh, you're good at something, and then you have to better follow everything, better stay good, or else and I get that. I've always said this, like, I don't, artists in some ways, and I don't know why I'm like, they shouldn't have any harder time, but because it's hard work, and but like artists, I am saying like, no, I don't want to be a part of any kind, I don't want to work at any company for anything, or even though I do, I'm on signed on labels and all this stuff, but it's like, I all I want to do all day is think about myself, sing about out loud about myself, and smoke weed or whatever, and like and like I'm going to get there, and like and so and I'm there, right? And so people are like, wait, if you're going to pretend that that's all you're going to contribute to society, songs about your life, and you're not going to like build any roads or help do anything else, you better be really, really, really good. You better like, and
Sure.
so I like art criticism. um I respect, because it's kind of like it's like the
It's the
magic.
tax.
It's magic criticism. If it's not magical, if it's not magic, people are like, no, you can't call yourself a magician unless it's magic, and I get that. So and it's fun. It's a strange world. It's like being a professional athlete. Very few are going to be able to like navigate all that stuff. But everybody's an athlete. Everybody loves playing ball, and like as long as you just keep, remember, you just love singing about yourself, or you love playing ball. Just remember that. Then then the rest of that's the thing you have to remember is like, yeah, it's amazing if you can manage to keep the lights on, and pay your rent and put your kid through school, whatever it is, by making art. But you'll be one in a million. But it's the pursuit of that, and just to be able to make art or to play sports is at all is incredible. And I don't know, I just don't take it for granted. I complain about it, but I know what a fool I sound like when I whine, you know.
One thing that was helpful for me, because my books have sort of made their way through sports, I've gotten to meet some different athletes over the years. And like, arguably what they do is harder than what we do because you have to have all these physical gifts and it's a smaller window you can do it. And
Hmm.
they, I mean, they get paid a lot more. But
Hmm.
it was interesting to me, it's like you sort of make up that like it's like I'm so tense and focused and intense about what I do because it's so serious to me. Then you kind of
Hmm.
meet someone who's like world class at what they do. To go to your point about these artists, you meet someone who's like world class at what they do, maybe even much better at their thing than your thing, and they're just kind of chill about it.
Yeah.
And you're just like, oh, you can do this and not be miserable all the time. Like you can
Yeah.
like, they're like, oh yeah, I got a game tonight. And you're like, yeah, you're playing the Lakers. You're like, you're
Right.
defending your title against the Lakers tomorrow. And you're just
Yeah.
like, yeah, I got a game later. Like I would be such a bundle of nerves. And sometimes it's good to
Mhm.
see other people do what they do and go like, maybe there's another way to do it.
Well, I mean, I don't know how. I think you just have to do something over and over again until you don't have the choice to to be a bundle of nerves anymore. Um, and and I will say this about like it's making a record is nerve wracking, scary, but like getting on stage to perform in front of people, whether it's 5,000 or 50,000, it's almost the same amount of stomach turning tightness and anxiety every time. It's only gone from like 1,000% down to it's only shrunk just enough that I don't worry about it every time, but it's always there. Every time I walk on stage, there's a I'm terrified. My voice shakes for the first three songs. And so you only barely you just get it into a point where it's containable, where it allows you to go onto the field every night, every day. I mean, I'm sure artists, there are a lot of athletes and artists get to the point where it's like it's just easy peasy, but most I've talked is like it's doable, but it's never easy peasy, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I just mean it's like, oh, they're not torturing themselves about this. Like they actually are enjoying it as they're doing it, which is the whole, you can end up taking your work and your pain so seriously that you suck, or the stakes of it and the pressure of it and your desire to win so seriously that you suck the fun and beauty out of the fact that you get to write songs or write books or
Yeah.
shoot a ball for a living.
Yeah, I think you have to lose a lot of games, get used to losing, and once you get used to losing, you really start to enjoy um, all of it so much more. Like if you're not used to losing, if you win all the time, you can't even enjoy winning, right?
Right.
Because the win is just another pellet on that thing. You just need more pellets. But once you get used to not having any pellets, once you get used to being hungry, um, every win is a good taste, and you savor it. And so that's the one thing with our band is um, we stayed hungry. We definitely stayed hungry for a long time. We didn't get too many lucky breaks, but then along the way you get a handful, and we've stacked up and taken opportunities and seen opportunities. We've been strategic about our career. It wasn't all just luck and fumbling. And anyway, yeah, there's
No, that's what I was sort of saying earlier. What's fascinating about your career is that it's a steady upward trajectory. I mean, obviously, I'm sure if you zoom in, you see the peaks and valleys, but a lot of bands sort of have they come out hot and they peak and then they go down. You guys have had this sort of steady growth, both in terms of your audience, but I also think as artists, like, and not many people get the opportunity to keep doing it, right? Um, I was thinking about this actually. I was going to ask you, like when I listen to some of your early stuff, it's very stripped down, right? It's very simple. And then as you've gotten at like the most recent album, it's much richer and deeper. It's obviously the same band, but it's richer and deeper. Like when I read some of my early stuff, it's much rawer and more stripped down, and I think I get to the point faster. How do you balance like getting better with this tendency, it's also easy to become self-indulgent. Like I
Mm.
know I look somewhat warily at the fact that each one of my books is longer than the last book. And I don't know
Mm.
if that's a good thing or the fact that I can't edit myself.
I think it's almost impossible to stay on a steady uh like getting better all the I think you have to sort of if you want that arc to be really long, meaning you have to kind of start to do. I say this. I mean, it might be different for the type of writing you're doing, but yeah, my writing does change, and I can see how my writing has changed, at least in the band, and how the band presents songs, and how the band, works on songs, and we've all changed along the way, um, and sometimes it's like you get away from something, in that where you're not, you haven't found the other thing yet, but you're away from that thing, and that's a weird spot. There's always like adolescent zitty phases of going from this type, of your band to the
Sure.
next phase of it, and it usually takes two or three records to get to that next spot. And
Huh.
so, and even I would say this. I mean, when I look at, like, I mean, that's the thing about like songs and records and everything. It's like nobody quite knows where we're going, and the best stuff is always like half. You're somewhere in between. You haven't landed on it yet. The most exciting art is always like it's almost about it almost doesn't work, right?
Yeah.
And that usually happens when you're when you go out on the branches that you're not comfortable on, the ones that are, or um, I really think it's important to try to change the way you write, and to maybe go, like, you like, go bigger and write more, and then you'll get nervous that you're like, I'm writing too much, I'm being too verbose here. Let's get back to my early, like, lean and mean writing, and you go through all these phases, but you kind of have to go out into territories, or else you'll get so sick you'll end up writing very bad versions of your earlier books, and you just, yeah, I whenever I'm nervous and I feel like, oh gosh, this isn't working, or this might flop, um I'm always the most excited, and I think I'm learning the most when I'm this close to humiliating myself.
No, that's really interesting. Yeah, I was thinking, like on Bon Iver's last two albums, it seems like he tried a lot of stuff on 33 A Million that paid off much bigger on the next album. Like the whatever that journey was
Hmm.
fully docked in on the second try with that style. Now, they're both very good albums. I've listened to them both many times. But yeah, that's an interesting way to think about it. It's like, it's not, hey, I'm going to try this experimental thing. It's like you really have to invest in going down a road to see if it
Hmm.
pays off.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how to. I mean, they're the artists, though, that I cherish the most, and whatever, just in my head, are just like, that's just top shelf. Even there are the people that have evolved and gone through strange phases. I mean, I mean, Dylan has, and Bowie and everything, but Nick Cave is somebody that has just gone through so many different phases of an artist, and you might, be fond of one type of Nick Cave more than another, and think that, like, get back to whatever, Nick, and like Nick's like, it's all part of the thing, and I just artists that don't that play it safe, and don't kind of take these bold leaps where they might lose lose half their fan base, or whatever. Those those aren't, they never end up the ones that are in record collections 20 years from now.
Right. No, sometimes the things that really last partly because they were so ahead of their time. And so you have to kind of lead the audience a little bit. And you can't do that without a real chance that it doesn't land at all.
Or I'm saying this, it doesn't even have to be like Dylan went through phases that were good, and then phases that were like, that was, but that road, you know into sort of kind of territory that was felt a little maybe off the shelf or canned, or he was putting on some sort of character. Yeah, that and it didn't feel quite genuine or something. Or sometimes those things that aren't as successful, they're not like ahead of their time, but they're a bridge for someone to get from where they are to somewhere else. Sometimes you got to go back to go back and start over from a new spot and go off in this direction. So a lot of people, I get that, people are like, what are they doing? This is a mistake for them. Like, just wait, they're doing this. This is just one record, or this is one. It's always like Radiohead, is a band that like everybody, when they didn't follow up with more Creeps, people are like, what are they doing? And now people are like, oh, thank goodness we didn't have just like a band that had 4 or 5 songs like Creep and then quit because they wanted, just got bored with that. They kept just trying to reinvent what the idea of their band was, and all that, and they're just so exciting. They're so exciting because you never know, and you just trust them to trust themselves. That's the thing, is like you might not agree with it. Like you're like, oh, I felt like you're overdoing this, or like, as an artist, this subjective stuff. But like,
Sure.
you always pay attention to those artists that are almost, or just like Sufjan Stevens is another one. It's just and Fiona Apple, and just the ones that you're not sure what they're. Kendrick Lamar is a great example. You're just not sure what the hell the next thing is going to be like.
Yeah, there's something like, I'm a huge Iron Maiden fan too, and there's also something to like, hey, we're just going to put out the same album for 40 years. Like, there's also something to that too.
No, I know. Do they think of it that way though? Or I mean, my brother Tom, Iron Maiden is his. Yeah, he can't. He loves it, and maybe there's that too. There's sort of like the warm hug every time. You're, it's like the Christmas movie or something. You just, I don't know.
Well, no, what's funny about Iron Maiden is they had that period, but it's like, they broke up, they came back together, and then like 30 years in, they put out an album in 2000 called Brave New World, which very few bands put out maybe one of their best albums 30 years in. So there's it's like, I was reading an interesting piece a couple years ago that was like, actually somewhat recently, they were talking about the rise of the super teams in the NBA is really fascinating, right? LeBron bounces around, Kawhi Leonard bounces around, and they make these great teams. But there's also something to be said about the San Antonio Spurs over, 20, I think the Spurs made the playoffs like 25 consecutive years, 24 consecutive years. And then actually it was creating the system that allowed them to be great over those periods. Like, that you need to do that. There's something to experimentation is great. That's one path. And then also there's something about like, what happens when you're in the pocket for 30 years? What comes out of it? It may be something magical in a totally different way.
Yeah. It's funny. There's the National. My band is I would say that it is when we've been a band for 20 years, and that's pretty rare for bands to stay bands that long. Some cross over and just like stay bands forever, like U2 or something. But U2 is an example. They had to kind of try to reinvent. They had to do something new a lot to stay interesting. But the dynamic of our band, like the 5 main guys, that is there is a system. There is a, and it's a weird system. It is like a baseball team. I really do think of a, and it's grown, and there's a whole group of people, including Kyle and Ben, who play horns, and my wife, who writes a lot, and all this stuff. That the team has expanded beyond those 5 guys, but there's something to the way the 5 of us throw a ball around, and it's. I mean, we scream at each other on the field all the time, and in the locker room, it's nothing but kicking lockers and throwing. It's like we've been playing ball together for so long, but we do know that when we get on the field, we know how to win. We just we know how to play this. But and it sort of becomes like when we get in the studio and start playing, it's like it's 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 easy. It's easy and it used to be hard. It used to be hard to get and to come up with ideas, but um, now we get in there and it's really easy to write songs. Our challenge now is to like is to evolve. Like, yeah, I mean, if we wanted to, we could go in and make, you know, boxer after boxer, or even Sleep Well Beast, which is nothing like boxer, we could probably make that fast, you know, now. But the thing that's slow with us is like everyone trying to like, I don't want to do that again. What should we do? And without trying to sound like we're, you know, you don't want to pander to anything. And sometimes you just don't know what, you don't know what's going to excite you. And it takes a long time to get excited by a song. Yeah.
I was going to tell you, I think I emailed this to you, and I don't know if it's insulting or high praise, but I think my family may have listened to your song Quiet Light more than any other
Mm.
person ever in history. So
Mm.
like my son, for the first 2 years of his life, he just refused to sleep. And one
Mm.
night we were playing that song on the Sonos, and he fell asleep. He just fell asleep.
Yeah.
And we were like, well, we're never not playing that song. And so it plays it
Nice
plays
to
on
hear.
repeat in the Sonos, like Spotify
Yeah.
sent me the, you know, the end of the year thing on my
Yeah.
wife's phone, and it was like, you've played this song 14,000
Mm.
times this year. Uh, and the best part is, like, let's say that song comes on like a playlist or something in the car, my son will freak out because he's like, it's not time for bed. I don't want to go to
Oh,
sleep. He's
that's
like
funny.
a Pavlovian dog
Yeah,
at
yeah,
this point.
yeah.
Like, he knows.
That's funny. Oh, yeah, we're gonna ruin it. That'll be like, oh, that music that they used to manipulate me with. Yeah. Well, no, that's kind of really cool because this it makes me sound, reminds me of Stardust, because that's, I've done a lot of talking about the record Stardust by Willie Nelson, from '78, you know, which was my parents, just maybe they used that to chill
Sure.
me out. But so every time I hear it, I'm like, but it works on me. I'm like, oh, I'm like, you know, I'm somewhere at home in Cincinnati, and I'm safe and I'm happy, and everybody in the house is happy, and it just brings that sense back, you know. Yeah.
As someone who's been on the road a bit, does your family go back and forth between like, it's so wonderful to have you home, and like, when the hell are you getting out of here? Like, we can't live like this.
That's a little of both. I would say towards the beginning of the pandemic, and this being at home, um, it was like, oh my gosh, it's so nice to be home. And then there was this phase of like we're kind of on top of each other, and this is, and then, you know, also kids home from, my daughter's home from school, um, but then now I think we've kind of crossed over into this other thing where we're really cozy and really kind of hibernating, and yeah, yeah, like I said, you kind of like, you go, but now I'm really settling into being home, and and I'm realizing how, the funny part is I'm realizing how inside a paradigm of go 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 I was, and that was never going to stop, and I don't want that to stop, but I don't think I was aware of how fast I was going, and how long I'd been going at that speed, you know. And 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 it literally, it's like it's almost taken me months and months just for my gears to start to slow down. And yeah.
Yeah, it's weird because you tell yourself that you're productive on the road, or, you know, doing, like, I told myself, yeah, sure, I'm really busy, I'm go go go, but you know, look at my output, I'm still, you know, I'm still doing all this stuff, clearly it's not affecting me. And then you spend like, yeah, 7, 8, 9 months at home, and you're just like, I don't know about you, but I'm like, I'm operating creatively on a whole other level
Mhm.
that yeah, you really need. It's like you tell yourself, "Well, I'm going to go on a 2 week vacation, and that'll help me relax." And it's like, no, it takes 10 months for me to relax, apparently, because I'm
Yeah.
like just now
uh,
easing into it.
Vacations are so, those have always been the hardest thing, because you as a kid, they're so, vacations are the greatest thing, because these adventures, you're just so excited. As adult, especially with kids, you do like a 2 week vacation is like right on like day 12. You're like, all right, finally, like you're just you can finally start to unwind, and then you just got to start packing for going home. So that's really rough. But yeah, I have found myself to finally feel, like, granted, like, talk to me tomorrow, I might just be bouncing off the walls or
Right.
whatever for one reason or another, but I do feel like generally my coil has like genuinely unwound somewhere where I don't hope it never gets that tight again, whatever it is. And but I'm sure it will. It's
Well, it's like if it takes as long to rewind the coil as it did to wind it up in the first place,
right.
that means, like, okay, 60 years from now, I'll need another break like this, is the way
Yeah.
I'm thinking about it.
Performing, like, I would always say that, like, it takes me about 2 hours, like for a 2 hour show, it takes me about an hour and a half or 2 hours just to get ready for it, to get in the zone. And it often takes me at least 2 hours to wind down, from that performance. So every show is like a 5 or 6 hour intense thing. And then I realized I've been doing that for 15 years,
Yeah.
and so just being home for a couple of weeks, or having a couple of days off on tour in a hotel. It doesn't matter, how many hot tubs, or or how good the room service is, and it doesn't matter. Cannot you can't turn it off like that. And when it's never off for decades, it does cause permanent damage, or just damage. And that's why bands don't last. So with this whole thing, yeah, all these things is like the national. I think most artists I know have learned a lot. At least the touring musicians have learned a lot in this past year. It's been so hard on this whole industry, but also there's been a whole other kind of discussion about, like, that thing that we were forced to do, like, that wasn't good for us, and, like, why is this so hard to survive as an artist, and especially now. So I think there's a lot of artists like, this is an opportunity to rethink the industry a little bit. I mean,
Yeah, it's like financially, it's devastating. Creatively, it's an enormous gift. And you got to
it is.
choose which one you're going to think about when you wake up in the morning.
Yeah, yeah. It's always. I mean, if you're going to be an artist, likely you'll always be dealing with a financial anxiety. I mean, almost always. And so if art is something that you have to just think of it as bonus, like you like you're an artist, like if you expect it to make money off of art, I mean, artists should. And I mean, I think,
Sure.
I think teachers should get paid like doctors, and I think artists should get paid like doctors too, and I think doctors should get paid better,
Sure.
I just but but most of the time it's like the best teachers, like, you're not becoming a teacher because you want to, you want your teaching empire, it's like. And so most art, the real artists I know are always like, if they have success, they're a little bit like, feel weird about it and just hate it and don't know what to do with it. um it's not something to make any money at, and it's something to to make your life happy.
Yeah.
They're very different things. Yeah.
No, like for me with speaking, it was like I would tell myself like, oh, it's an hour's work. I just have to go work for an hour. But your point too, where it's like, it's not the hour, it's the flight there. It's the 3 hours to work yourself up to it. It's the 2 hours to wind yourself down to it. The idea that you could just go back to like creative, normal human functioning after that. And I think a lot of days as a normal person over the last 8-9 months has unlocked, I think, a different emotional awareness that hopefully fuels the art, and hopefully great stuff comes out of this for lots of people.
Yeah. I mean, one of the other things is, like, artists, for whatever reason, and I think, anybody who has success in athletes, there's a motivation to sort of like live the life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you feel like, and so many artists I see desperately trying to, live what they by seeing documentaries what looked like euphoria, whether
Yeah.
it's women and partying and just all that is you often see people trying to have a taste of that thing that they saw in the Rolling Stones doc, because and it really is. It really, there isn't much of that really there, at least not anymore. It's hard work out there, and you can't really do that for very long to sustain it. Like there are very few Keith Richards,
Right.
and
There's a
that's
lot
like
more
always a
dead
thing.
Keith Richards.
Right, yeah, and it's always, but it's not even that. It's just like this idea of just being, you know, going and just after parties. It doesn't matter. You could don't even drink, and you could be kind of straight edge, but just the anxiety of having to keep up with that socializing and all that, like that thing that you're supposed to be a big fun party entertaining lifestyle, that kind of a thing is really unsustainable. And so I don't know. Like some of this now, I think is like a lot of artists are just home, and when all that pressure to go to this thing or that party or all that the social anxieties and the social pressures of having to do a kind of lifestyle that maybe not be great for everybody. Nobody can do kind of any kind of lifestyle right now, so
Right.
it's good for it. Just it's yanked me out of a thing so that I can see what I like about that thing. So when I go back into it, I'm just going to say none of that, this stuff, just this type of it, and you have to be outside of it to see what's what.
The last thing I was going to ask you is, I was listening to it this morning, the lyrics on the new Taylor Swift song you did, it seemed very stoic to me, where you say, "There's this pounding in my head. What's a lifetime of achievement?" There's these beautiful passages in Meditations where Marcus goes like, "Who remembers the name of the emperor 3 emperors ago?" It's sort of this
Mm-hmm.
idea that it's like,
Mm-hmm.
that it all ends up sort of as dust.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the other side of that line is like, what good is that if it drives someone away? What matters
Mm-hmm.
is family or life or purpose, the connection you have with other people. I'm just curious, sort of what that line meant to you.
Well, I definitely, I mean, when I doing that, and I mean, obviously you sort of like, Taylor wrote all those things, and I just assume it's like that frustration you feel that that and it becomes a burden that you're worried about the past. You're like,
Yeah.
that was an injustice to me, and I'm sure like, but there's a lot of Taylor songs she's processing grievances, and that's what I do a lot,
Yeah.
but almost always there. And I can tell that that's with her, is like you're processing how you reacted to that. You're kind of like you're taking yourself to task a little bit, and like saying like, you know what, there's nothing, I can't do anything about that. Why am I letting that person or this system or this industry or that person there really affect my joy today, or like, or my joy, like, really, do I need to react? Do I need to let them? And so I think great songwriters often write about, here's what this is how I always react, and I know I shouldn't. And so there's a lot of bad behavior in songs, and there's a lot of pettiness, and there's a lot of like, there's a lot of bitterness and revenge in art, because that's the best place for it, right? It's like a good place for it, a little bit. I say that, I'm not reading into any of specifically into Taylor's work that way, but there's a lot of that in mine. You want to hear somebody getting stuff off their chest, and but a lot of times it's like, look how I let this crap get to me, and I know I'm my own worst enemy.
What I sort
That's
of
where.
made up about it, what I loved about it, maybe I'm reading it totally wrong, is it's sort of this idea too, if you're like, to go to your point about, you started, you're so ambitious and driven, and you have this art and these things you want to express. Sometimes it can feel like the success or the reach or the beauty of the art it can almost redeem personal failings. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
that's not how it works. That no, it doesn't matter how great you are, how big you get. it's not an excuse for anything, and it doesn't mean anything in the end, really.
No, yeah, well, it goes both ways. Like a lot of times artists are, are saying, and I found that like you present something as as like, as I say, listen, I know what a shit I am, or I know I'm like, and or you present you're the most self-deprecating, and you present yourself in the most humiliating way, is a move. It's a power play. So like,
Sure.
I get it, that's me, I'm sorry, and that's good. That's empowering to people to say, to like, all my favorite artists were misfits of one kind or another, who like any other life, they might have not been able to inspire people just to be their true selves. But
Sure.
then there's this other thing that you start to like, oh, as artists or as celebrities or whatever you call it, start to drink your Kool-Aid and believe that like, well, yeah, I maybe rules don't apply to me, and then you get, cults, and you get
Yeah,
all,
yeah.
you get all the bad, but it can run away. It can run away with from you. And I've found that about myself. I've found myself many times like, who am I? What am I doing? Like, what, this is not, my dad wouldn't do this, you
Right.
know?
Totally.
But then again, I'm like, my dad's never been in this situation either,
That's true.
so maybe he would. But there is, you sometimes forget, yeah, your compass can you go to the Bermuda Triangle a little bit with attention, and social media too. It can mess with your bearings, and I found that. So you just have to be careful. Just having good friends around too. Just like my dad. Speaking of good friends, my dad, the thing he's said to me more than anything else in my life is slow down. It's like, and it's the thing I try to do more than anything else, And so just slowing down, and it's I write about it more than anything else because I find it the hardest thing to do.
I'm the same way. I mean, I wrote a book about ego. I wrote a book about overcoming
Yeah.
obstacles, and I wrote a book about stillness. Not because I'm a master of any of those three things.
because you're failing,
Of course.
You write about the mountain you can't climb, you can't get up. Yeah, for sure.
Totally. Matt, thank you so much. I love this
Yeah,
stuff. This was a real pleasure for me.
likewise. Thanks, Ryan. Thanks for
Of
having me.
course.